Hey guys, welcome back to Keeping It Apostolic, the most edifying podcast in the world. Just a quick note about this episode. The guest, David, who is the co-host of the Into the Deep podcast, has recently just got a couple of liver transplants. And so as part of that, I have attached the link to a GoFundMe in the description, so please feel free to donate to help his recovery and enjoy the episode. Back to Keeping It Apostolic, the most edifying podcast in the world. I'm joined here today with David Guirguis, co-host of Into the Deep. Thank you, David, for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. It's interesting to be here on the other side of the podcast.
Sure it is. So before we get started a little bit, get to know you a little bit, tell us about who you are, your bio, what you do, all that stuff.
Cool. So my name is David. Originally, I'm from California. I grew up there, and then I moved to Tennessee probably 4 years ago because I met my wife, I got married, and I've been here ever since. I went to school for engineering, and I currently work as an engineer. And for fun, I like to make podcasts with Abuna Theo. So that's a little bit about me.
That's fun. So before we get into the topic about your podcast, Into the Deep, and all the insights of it, I'd like to ask a little bit about your spiritual life and about your spirituality and growing up in the church and things. So for all of us in the church who grew up in the church, we tend to go through the motions as kids and kind of just like show up on Sundays and do all that. But there comes a point in our life where we have to like take a decision and like decide to take our faith seriously. What was that moment for you? What was that like? And how did you kind of come to terms with that and obviously decide the decision that you ended up taking?
Sure. So I'm a little different because I went through both phases. So obviously I grew up in the church. I was a deacon, and my family went to church all the time, and it was just something that we all did. And as I got a little older and started questioning things a little more, I kind of built like this, not resentment, but I started to kind of veer away from the church, like end of high school going into college. And then when I got to college, that was when I made the wrong decision to ultimately stop going to church. And so throughout all my college experience, I maybe went to church a handful of times. I'd say like 5 maybe, but I basically wanted nothing to do with the church at that point. I think it was mostly just because, honestly, I don't really know why, but I felt like maybe I was forced to go. And so now that I had the choice when I went to college to do what I wanted, I just decided not to go. And so, going through all of college, not going to church, and then I graduated, moved back home because it was really difficult to find a job. And then during that time, it was probably like I was 19 to 24, maybe 25. It always felt like something was missing, and I hated that feeling because in the back of my head I knew what it was, and I just refused to accept it at that time because I'm very stubborn. And so I kept on, trying to find any other reason to blame it on why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And then really coming to Tennessee and seeing it's so different here. The culture here, like the church life here, is so different than it is in California. And I saw here it was like people wanted to go to church. They weren't forced to do it. And so I gradually started getting back into church, and that feeling of missing something eventually started to go away. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I need to accept that, this is what I need to be doing, is going to church. And so I would say experiencing what it was like without church is what pushed me to go back to church.
So in that time when you were kind of away from the church and you've, now since came back and are very involved in the service and stuff, what would you say the church means to you personally? Not like as an institution, but to you as David, what does the church mean to you?
I would say that, to be honest, it's the only place that I feel like I can really be at peace. Like it's such a weird feeling going from being like very confused and just lost, and then to have this like switch into having a purpose. Service was a big thing because I never served before, and it really does give you this like fulfillment and purpose that you just couldn't find anywhere else. And to me, it's something that I never want to miss out on again. So that's what I'd say. It's my sense of peace, my sense of fulfillment, and where I belong.
So talking a little bit about that sense of peace and fulfillment and just like being back in the church, be back in service. One of the services that you do is this podcast called Into the Deep. So we're going to talk basically the rest of the time about it. So
Okay.
I'd like to ask a little bit about the start of Into the Deep. What was the spark that led to you and Abuna Theodore starting this podcast, and kind of what went into it at the beginning?
So I would say it was mostly his idea, but I remember the talk started when I was listening to one of his sermons during church, and I was so touched by it. And every week it was like the most amazing sermon that I've ever heard. And I remember thinking to myself, like, people really are missing out by not being able to hear these sermons. And so I told him, I was like, you need to start posting these things. Like, you need to start posting them online, do something so that people can access, what you have to say. And he joked about it and was like, I've just been waiting for someone to take the lead and kind of, put themselves in that role. And I previously had a little bit of experience. I used to stream video games. I used to post on social media, like do all the content type of stuff, but never church related. So I had a little bit of experience in it, and I told him, like, I know how to press record on the camera. I know how to edit, so I can take on that responsibility. And then he got the idea of, hey, I want to start a podcast. And at the time I didn't know anything about podcasting, so I had to learn a lot from scratch. But we just kind of decided it was a thing, and I started learning, and we started recording, and that's how it started. So.
How do you feel like this podcast has shaped? How long have you guys been doing it for? About a year?
Actually, we're about to hit a year next week, I think. It'll be 1 year of posting.
First off, congratulations.
Thank you.
And this past year of your life doing this podcast, how has it kind of changed who you are, if it has?
I mean, it definitely has.
I'm sure.
I would say that it's changed me in more ways than one. So number one is, this is the first time I've ever done a service, and I didn't realize how important service was until I started serving. I always thought service was just Sunday school teaching, and I didn't realize that there was multiple avenues you could take. And so just beginning to serve, that in itself is such a huge shift in my perspective on the church and what role that each person plays within the church. But even more than that, being able to question everything in a way that I could get an answer instantly has really strengthened my faith, and it's really a blessing, because growing up, like I said, I had a lot of questions, and I never really got very good answers. So to be able to now have such a great person to turn to ask these questions to, it's really strengthened my belief, and it's taught me a lot of things that I never thought I would really care about. So,
as you look back on the last year of your life and the podcast, obviously, what are some things that you feel like you struggled with? What were some hesitations, some doubts you had at the beginning, and how have you kind of slowly overcame that as time has passed?
Sure. So I think the biggest kind of shock for me was when I initially brought up the idea to him. I always wanted to just be the person behind the camera, the person doing editing, and I never really wanted to be like a face that's shown, because I'm a very antisocial, to myself kind of person. I'm not very outgoing, and so when he told me, he's like, no, I want you to be on it and be the one asking the questions. I was like, I don't think that's a great idea. And so that was a really that was a big roadblock for me, because it's one thing to record yourself playing video games and that kind of, but then to put yourself on a camera talking about your religion and posting it to the world, that's like a whole nother level of outgoing that I really didn't feel comfortable doing. And so over time I kind of had to just get used to it. I mean, there's still times now when we'll start the intro and I have to do it 3 or 4 times because I get so nervous, just even if it's just, you know, him and I doing the recording. So that's definitely one of the roadblocks. The other one is people coming up to me and like asking, "Are you the podcast guy?" And like, that one's pretty tough for me. It's a cool feeling, but you know, I'm the kind of person that likes to go to church, take communion, and then, you know, just kind of not talk to anyone and go, like maybe say hi to a few people. But to be like recognized by a bunch of people and not know any of them it's a little weird to get used to.
Do you feel like that there was like a particular gap in the community or in like the space of, you touched a little bit on this when you were talking about the idea of it, but do you feel like there's any gap that Into the Deep is trying to fill in the Christian content space?
I think so. I mean, when I first started to like research about it, I remember like scrolling through like TikTok and Instagram, and I would see all these like other religions popping up, like that. I mean, some crazy ones like that I was like, there's no way that these people genuinely believe what they believe. Like I'm talking like the I don't know if you know like Billy Carson, like the guy who's like I don't know how to explain it, but he basically talks about like how there's like giants that used to rule the world and like Sumerians and all these.
Heard of this.
It's like a really weird thing, and it's all like nonsense. But it was like a very popular video, and he had multiple of them, and I was like, oh. And then I would see like Muslims come on, and they would be preaching, and basically everybody except Coptic Orthodox. I was like, what? Like, why are we not doing this? You know, like, where's our representation? And so when I started Googling like Coptic Orthodox, and you'd find like these really old videos of like, look like they were recorded on like a flip phone, or the audio is super bad. And then the only other thing that I found was your podcast actually. And I was like, oh, so like somebody's done this. But that was really it. Like there was no other kind of representation for it. And I was like, I feel like we're losing this fight of popularity just by not being on social media as Coptic Orthodox. So I don't know that that's exactly the gap I was trying to fill, but I think that it's definitely something that needs to start, we need to start doing a little bit better with.
And I think it has. I mean, I don't know if you've, like, I like to keep up with the Coptic podcast world just because it's, you know, something I'm very obviously invested in. And ever since, like, I say probably in the last year, there's been 5 or 6, 7, you know, like very solid podcasts that have came out and like started, and it's really cool to see. It's really cool to see the, you know, just people realizing like, no, like this is like a real thing you can do, and it's not just like a joke people do on the side. Like I know, like you brought up my podcast, like it started as a joke. I mean, if you go look at the first season, nothing is serious. Like not a single word of it is serious, but it obviously turned into something a lot more serious than it was back then, and a lot bigger, and like thank God it's grown. And I think I see the same thing with not that Into the Deep was not serious, but like just watching the growth of this space and of this, like, you know, people really taking the Coptic Church and putting it into media, not just podcasts but media in general, I think is a very interesting thing, and leads to my next set of questions, which is about engaging our community into our services. And so obviously your podcast is very topic based versus mine's very people based. So it's you know, very different. And I really appreciate the ability that you and Abuna Theodore have to really delve so deep into these topics and some of these very tough topics. I know, I think 2 weeks ago or last week, you guys just had a podcast about abortion come out. And so it's like, these are very like heavy topics that, you know, like you said, like putting your faith out there, your religion out there is not like an easy thing to do. So my question is, how are you guys able to engage the community in those topic-based conversations versus like a people one? It's a lot easier because they're just relating to the human being in front of them versus the topic at hand. I
think a big part of it is I've always been really good at putting myself in like a different person's position, right? So like I have a lot of friends that are agnostic, some are atheists, I have like a whole range of friends that I talk to. And so we'll actually always question each other on topics like this. And I will argue with them to get their perspective so that I can take that and bring it in to, in front of Abuna Theo. And he does such a good job of of understanding where the question is coming from, and then being able to answer it in such a simple and effective way that you can't really argue against. I feel like a lot of the times when you talk about these very difficult topics, it's because people have these assumptions that if you don't believe, the abortion one, for example, if you don't believe in abortion, then you hate women because you're saying they can't choose, or there's a whole mess of topics that people, if you don't have a specific angle on it, they just classify you as something. But in reality, if you really break it down to what is being said, it's actually, this is just what we believe. We care that, about everybody's life. This is a life, and so we protect it. It's how could you argue that against that? So the way he breaks it down, honestly, is amazing. And I think I'm really good at just asking questions. It's kind of weird to say, but I know probably the least out of any person in the Coptic Orthodox Church. I'm the bottom of the barrel when it comes to knowledge based. So if I can learn from him, then there's only people there are people that I think everyone will benefit, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think that anyone is lower than me in terms of knowledge. So if I can kind of set the bar and then raise it as I learn, then everybody will kind of get swept up with it in a weird way.
It's very interesting you say that, because obviously being in the podcast world and trying to perfect being a podcaster, you have to study podcasts. So obviously the best example of a podcaster, maybe not in terms of the content, but just the ability of podcasting, is Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan is the biggest idiot on planet Earth. He's what makes him so good at podcasting is that he doesn't know anything. And his ability just to ask questions out of pure curiosity and not preemptively trying to lead the question in a certain way to get a specific answer out. That's what makes a podcaster so good. And I think that's a skill, the ability to ask the question from a perspective of someone who doesn't know as much about it. And that's something I struggle with a lot. A lot of times I just know what the answer is going to be, and I just kind of ask the question just off a whim. But to have that ability to kind of bring yourself to the viewer's level, I think is a very important aspect to have. And I think that with Into the Deep, because of the nature of the podcast and the fact that it's part of St. Verena's service, St. Verena being an American Coptic Orthodox church, which its goal is to reach very out and broad and bring people into the church. You have a very diverse audience. You have people who are never heard of Orthodoxy before, to people who have been in the church and they're 80 years old and they've been here their whole lives. So how do you guys kind of cater your episodes so that people who are on either side of the spectrum or anywhere in the middle don't really feel left out or they're not benefiting from it?
I think that's a tough one, because we have gotten feedback from both sides, people that are in the church saying we listen to every episode and we benefit so much from all these questions. And then the people that comment and they're actually they'll send us messages and stuff we've actually never heard of the Coptic church, but after watching the podcast, now we're looking up churches next to us. We want to go and get baptized, and to see that even just the way that I don't think I remember one of the things we discussed initially was who do we want to target? Do we want to target the people that are already Coptic, or do we want to target the people who are kind of on the fence, or do we want to target people that have never heard of it? And the weird thing is we never really came to a conclusion. It was kind of just why don't we just talk about the things we believe? And I think the fact that the people who have never heard of it are interested just as much as the people who know it but maybe don't fully understand it, it benefits everybody. I would struggle to believe that there's one person that's listened to a full episode that didn't learn a single thing, even if they're the most knowledgeable person. That, I think that's the beauty of it, is that everybody can benefit from the person who knows the least to the person who knows the most. So I think not targeting a specific audience is kind of benefiting us. So.
And what's so funny about that is if you walk into any business school, day one is define your target audience, define your clientele, define your customers. And I think the beauty of service is that it's for all. And just simply put, it's for all. And I had the same thing like when I started, and like not really when I started, when it shifted to more of a Orthodox content, was like, what is my target audience? And I came to the same conclusion. It's like whatever audience wants to listen to.
Right. Whoever wants to listen is the audience.
Yeah. So how do you think, in what ways do you think us as a church, we can better utilize media and things like like podcasts and just social media in general to kind of push our faith, but in a way that's not diluted?
I think my first thought is a little improvement goes a long way. Like I think the pandemic did a pretty good job of this, kind of instinctively, where everyone started to like shift to an online presence of like going live for the liturgies, or like they'll do Sunday school live because we couldn't really do anything. At least in California, we couldn't at that time. But I think that if there's just small investments that are made, like I think it would really benefit a lot of people. Just the camera quality doesn't have to be crazy expensive or anything, but it's like a dedicated camera or audio that doesn't sound like it was recorded 20 years ago. I think these things they would go a long way if people just knew that that's something that they could do, you know. And I think that with the youth that we have now and how technologically advanced they are, I'm sure anyone from any church would jump at like the opportunity to be able to take on that role and kind of like elevate the quality of whatever is happening in the church, and then transferring that to an online presence would be super easy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to like listen to a sermon from Mba Yusuf or like Abuna AP, and it sounds like I couldn't listen to it because the sound is it sounds like somebody was using their iPhone from the back of the room trying to record the audio. But I think as we start to see more and more of like podcasts start popping up, and more of these social media accounts, and even just like fun stuff, like I know the St. Verena youth group will like have these funny videos where they'll go around asking like trivia questions, and they make a video out of it, stuff like that. I mean, I see that on social media now too, and I think as more and more people start to do it, it will just kind of snowball into this huge impact that will impact a lot more people than they realize.
Do you think there's a danger in that though?
In what sense?
Like, do you feel like there's a danger in over digitalizing our faith?
I think it can get to a dangerous place if we lose track of what the end goal is. I think you have to approach it with like a genuine curiosity, and I think the danger would be,
because there's a big conversation around like things like Coptic memes, you know, like people messing up in liturgy and like posting like funny little compilations of it and things, which obviously is its own subject compared to just like trivia or like fun videos like that. But the question is, where is that line? Like, is the line so far where it's like, okay, maybe things like even like a fun little trivia are, you know, can be taken the wrong way, or like where is that line of what is appropriate and acceptable and what is maybe not as appropriate and acceptable? Because I mean, literally every person has a completely different opinion on it, and there's a spectrum of opinions. And so what do you think, where do you think it becomes dangerous?
I would probably veer on the side of you'd probably have to push it pretty far to get it to a dangerous place, only because if you play it safe and make the line, you know, we can't make any jokes about the Coptic church because it's disrespectful or whatever. So now I go from, my next video would have been somebody messing up in the liturgy, which would have been a funny video, which I can see the problem with it. But then the next video that I scroll to is an exponentially more problematic video. I mean, social media is full of garbage. And so I don't think that, I think the more that we can occupy a space in a beneficial way, I mean, I would view it as like, yes, maybe it can be taken too far, but I would rather see a video about liturgy than a video on, I don't know, like whatever streamer, TikToker doing XYZ, like, and I think that's what is mainly on social media now. So can it really get much worse than what's already out there?
It's a very good way to put it. Never really thought about it like that. Because I think a lot of people just, like, they want to be very, and it makes sense. Like, you want to be very, it's just, again, at the end of the day, it's church, it's liturgy, it's sacred, it's holy, it's divine. But I kind of fare on the side with you that, sometimes, like, you just have to let things be. You have to let things play out naturally, and instead of trying to overregulate.
Actually, that was one of the criticisms that when we first started the podcast, when I started posting, was people thought that I was the podcast, and specifically me, were going to confuse people or make people question things that they shouldn't be questioning. In the way that
I see what you mean.
in the way that I ask certain questions, like, how do we know the Bible's real? Like, someone would why can I trust the Bible? Is a simple question, right? And they would take that and be like, why are you trying to confuse our youth? And it got to me. I was like, oh, it's like I have to be really, really careful. But then I thought about it, and my response to them was like, let's assume I don't post that video or whatever, or let's assume I do it, and the youth that's watching it, if they scroll to the next video, it's going to be a video on Islam and why Islam is the correct faith, and like debunking a Christian or so. Like, I see tons of those videos. So I was like, do you think my video is going to do more damage than that video out there, or will my videos like reinforce the fact that, like, the answer that's given will reinforce their faith to be able to, ask the correct questions and get the correct answers? And I kind of had to, like, not push it aside, but I feel like I was very careful already, but it kind of just reinforced that, like, I really need to be careful what I post, because the second that I confuse anybody, it's like, that's on me, So that was a tough thing to get over at first.
You bring up a really good point about the whole like backlash. I was going to go to the next subject was, we'll move into it now, but like, how do you deal with, because obviously we live in a culture that's very judgmental, to say the least. How do you deal with that? Because you're on a podcast with Abuna Theodore. As a priest, there's different, like, we look at priests in a very specific way as Coptic people versus like a layman. And I can say this from my own experience having a podcast. So how does that affect you, and how do you kind of deal with that?
Thankfully, I haven't gotten too much negative criticism, but I don't think it would really. I have pretty thick skin when it comes to stuff like that. People probably couldn't tell me anything worse than I've either thought of myself or my friends have told me. So I don't really think that. I don't think I would have a problem kind of brushing it off. I think where my issues might lie is if I really made a mistake to the point where now I've impacted a lot of people's faith, or like shaken a lot of people's faith, that would probably do more damage than anything negative somebody could say. If my friends joke about me being on the podcast all the time. They send me jokes about it, and I don't ever take it to heart. It's just part of putting yourself online, I guess. So, and to kind of back that up, like I said, I was a streamer before. Like, I used to stream video games. The amount of stuff that people would say, just like to me streaming, like the people that would come into your chat, like, there's nothing that hasn't been said to me. So I just kind of grow to push it to the side.
What's your advice to people who maybe are not used to that, who want to take a step into this space or are already in this space? What's your kind of advice to them with dealing with those things?
I would say that a lot less people care about what you're doing than you think. And the ones that care, that are commenting negatively, are just jealous because they probably want to do the same thing. Nobody that admires what you're doing is going to talk negatively on you. And I think people really overshoot the fear that they're going to be judged, or a lot of it is like amplified to a place it will never really get to. And if you get to the point where you're, big enough or popular enough to get that much criticism, you're probably doing something right. So,
What would you say is your favorite episode you guys have done?
So my favorite one that I've personally benefited from was the episode on fasting. So it was right before Lent, I think, when we did it, and I've always been under the impression of like fasting was like such a burden, and it's like, oh, here we go again. And we read this book from Pope Shenouda about fasting, and for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but when I read the book, it completely like changed my entire view on it. And doing the episode and talking about it, it really opened up and like gave me a good explanation on what fasting was supposed to be, not what I thought it was. And then I started to, I would say this was probably the first time I ever like fasted correctly, and it's just a completely different experience than fasting in the way that like, oh, I just can't eat meat, or like, you know, if I get cheese, it's okay. Like in California, everyone fasts with cheese, which I don't know. It's but that's probably my favorite episode so far.
Has the podcast ever challenged your faith in a way that makes you like, you know, think a little bit more about aspects of it?
I'm gonna say no, but only because I challenged my own faith enough when I left the church. I mean, that to get to that point, I don't think that I would have come back unless I don't think I would be as convinced and as strong. I wouldn't say I'm strong in the faith, but like as strong as I am now compared to where I was, because of how much I rejected it before and how much I questioned it before. I don't think I've ever done like where we did an episode and I was like, you know what, I don't like that. That doesn't sit right with me. Everything makes so much sense, especially the way when Theo like is able to portray the message. It's really hard to take it in a negative way or in a way that's like, I don't like that answer. So I think that if anything, it's just strengthened my faith beyond a place I ever thought I would get to. So,
last question for you. If you could go back to this time last year, first episode, what would you tell yourself?
Ooh, okay. I have a funny answer and then I have a serious answer.
Let's hear both.
My funny answer is never forget to put it in autofocus, because there was one time I put it in manual focus and the entire episode was just blurry.
Let me tell you something, man. I've done how many of these? I don't know, 140 something filmed. I don't have a mic right now. Like it's, you know, at some point you realize like it's not that, you just gotta keep going. You know, you just gotta like keep going. There's so many episodes. I mean, especially like if you go to like some of the first ones, like audio's terrible, video is even worse. Like things don't work out. I have some that are like literally filmed on a toaster. Like, but there's almost a joy in it. There's like a fun aspect of like the challenge of like nothing is ever the same. You know, no two episodes have the same problems, same difficulties.
Honestly, that kind of relates to my serious part of the answer, but I mean, the amount of times that I'll like check everything to make sure it's perfect, and then,
I promise I had 2 mics in my bag before I left for Nashville. I promise.
It's crazy, and you'll never get to the point of like being really good at it unless you make all those mistakes along the way. So, I mean, the serious answer that I have is I think that I probably am a little bit too much of a perfectionist. Like I will spend hours and hours and hours on things that nobody notices. Like truly nobody will notice, but I notice them. And so I'll just sit there and it's I would probably go back and tell myself it doesn't need to be perfect, and that the message that's being told holds a lot more value than any little edit or modification that I make. So
like the little stuff's not that deep. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I had to throw that in there, you know, I had to. All right, so we're gonna ask some questions about the future. I know I said the last question, but I was
Sure.
lying. So.
Yeah.
What is your ultimate vision for Into the Deep? You want to stay as a podcast? You want to grow it into something else? What is it? What's the vision?
I think
How deep is it gonna get?
that's tough. I've never really thought of it, beyond what it is. I guess if it in like a perfect world, we'd probably have more than just me and Abuna on it. I guess like have multiple people working behind the scenes. It's really tough. And we're trying, and we're trying to expand it to like a smaller group of people.
Yeah, must be nice.
Yeah, it's tough. Number one, because it's hard for me to let go of like how I want everything done. But I think in a perfect world, I would want it to grow to a place that's beyond me. It's like to have it be like, if enough people care about it and take interest in it, that it would grow to a place where Abuna would probably have somebody a little bit more professional, or just as long as more people are benefiting, that's really all I care about. So
It's a lot of humility.
I mean, yeah, I don't like being the center of attention. I don't like my face being out there. So it's as long as if it ever got to a place where like I had to give up the podcast so that more people could benefit, I would do it in a heartbeat. So that's kind of that'd be in a perfect world. We'd have just a bigger reach and bigger platform.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely, as someone who's done this by themselves for 3 years, it's a lot. It's not like it's not an easy thing, but there's a blessing in it. There's a blessing in the struggle. There's a blessing in the work, but there's also a blessing in sharing it with others. And I think that for myself as well, one of the goals is to kind of expand it. But the problem is, finding people it's not
tough.
easy.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's hard to find someone as motivated as you are to do something you're as Pat. Like, this is like something I consider like what's going to be my life's work. So to find someone that passionate for my life's work, it's kind of difficult.
And I mean, I've thought about like maybe, because to be honest, one of my other big issues that I have since starting the podcast is expanding to beyond the podcast. Like instead of just doing podcasts, like now I do recordings for like his sermons and Bible studies, and like we have a group called the Armory. Sometimes whenever I show up, I'll just bring my camera and record for them, and then I'll edit a video for them.
It's a lot of editing.
Yeah, so and then like CYC reached out and they wanted us to do something for them, and it got to the point where like every free second I had, I was spent on my laptop editing, and it was like it got to a point where people like were like, hey, you need to relax, like this is getting too much. But I loved it, so I was like, this is great. I'd rather be doing this than anything else. But for sure, I think trying to offload some of the littler things is probably going to be something that I need to do very, very soon, because I personally don't think I can keep up.
Do you hand edit all the podcasts?
Yeah, so I hand edit all
You hand edit all you cut between the angles by hand.
Every single one. Actually, fun fact, for the first like 8 episodes, I didn't know that there in Adobe Premiere that there was a synchronize for audio. So I would I would have to find the spot where everything lined up and mark it and move. It was very time consuming.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow. Okay, an AI edits all my podcasts.
Really?
Yeah, it costs like, I'll send it to you later.
Okay.
But it saves me about 15 hours a week.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that would. I've thought about it,
And it's quick, it's easy, and it works perfectly fine.
You just assign like an audio to each.
Yeah. It's easy.
I should do that.
Wow, no, that's by hand that's insane.
Yeah, by hand, and every short,
No, I do everything AI.
Everything I do, everything is all me. Like I add
impressive.
the captions, I do all. CapCut does the captions now, thankfully, but yeah, it definitely. I could easily spend anywhere from like 20 to 40 hours on an episode.
Yeah.
So
No, easily. Well, thank you, David, for coming onto the podcast. It was a blessing and a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was fun being on.
You like being a guest?
Yeah, I don't know that I'll do it very much, but it was a good experience.
Oh, it was a good first experience.
Yeah, good first experience.
Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. See you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks.